Hi, my name is Gila Hoch, and I'm the director of the Dr. Russ Samuel's Jewish High School programs, and I'm going to share some thoughts with you on Parashat Re'eh. So in this week's Parsha, the first large section of the Parsha discusses the obligation to completely wipe out every remnant of idol worship in the land of Israel when we come in. And the Torah goes to great lengths to describe the complete and utter desolation that needs to happen, and how we cannot leave even one tiny bit of idol worship lest it tempt us into following the ways of the people who lived there before us. Then the Torah continues, within this large section, continues with some other laws that are related to this idea as well. For example, we have the law that all of our sacrifices, all of our korbanot, as opposed to idol worshippers who bring their korbanot everywhere, all of our korbanot must be brought in the mikdash, and that is a very strict law, which the Torah also elaborates on for a very long time. And then there are a couple of other sections relating to people who may tempt us to do otherwise, people who may tempt us to not act in the ways that God has laid out for us and not worship God in this way. For example, a false prophet, and the mesit, who is a person who worships idols and tries to tempt others. And there's also the Ir Nidacha, which is an entire city which worships idols, which must be wiped out entirely. And then after this entire section, the Torah concludes again, reminding us of the general mitzvah to wipe out all forms of idol worship. And this idea is really particularly drawn home, really, in my opinion, brought home in the pasuk towards the beginning of the section, where the Torah says to us, "Lo tasun k'chol asher anachnu osim po hayom, ish kol hayashar be'einav yaseh." That we're not supposed to be acting the way we've been living in the desert until now, where everything went kind of according to how each person wanted to live, according to each person's personal ideas. That's no longer going to be the case. Now there is going to be a full set of laws that society must adhere to in its entirety. One pasuk that particularly stuck out to me in this section, aside from that one, is a pasuk when the Torah describes what exactly we're supposed to bring to the Mikdash. The Torah says, "V'aveitem shama olotechem v'sivchechem v'et masrotechem v'et shumat yadchem v'nidrechem v'nitvotechem uv'chorot b'karchem v'tzonechem." The Torah lists to us all the different types of offerings that we must bring to Yerushalayim, sacrifices as well as masrot, as well as tithes and other such things that we ourselves will be eating, but they must be brought to Yerushalayim and be eaten within the walls of the city, offered in the Mikdash and be eaten within the walls of the city. Everything must happen within God's city, within God's house. And the reason this pasuk jumped out to me is because it actually turns up in Tractate Makot, which is what we are learning this summer on the high school program. And there, in Masechet Makot, Rabbi Shimon brings a drasha on this pasuk, and he explains that each one of the things in this pasuk, he ranks them all from the least stringent to the most stringent. And everything, the most stringent, includes the laws of all the others below it, as well as its own new law. And each one goes like that each one includes the laws of the lesser types of offerings, as well as its own unique law. And after this long drasha of Rabbi Shimon, Rava says of this drasha, Rava says to him, "Amar Rava dialdei imek Rabbi Shimon teled, ve'ilo lo teled," which Rashi explains that Rava is saying is that every mother should pray that her child will be like Rabbi Shimon. That's how great this drasha was. Rava praises Rabbi Shimon with in a very strong way, more than any other, that every mother should want a child like Rabbi Shimon. And then the Gemara turns to Rava and says, well, actually, Rabbi Shimon's drasha doesn't really make that much sense, and in fact we can refute every single one of his points, and spends a while going through each one, explaining why in fact what Rabbi Shimon does not exactly make sense, and we could have easily said otherwise. So the Gemara asks, well then, Rava, why did you praise Rabbi Shimon so strongly? And the Gemara answers in the name of Rava, Dilamai Desfira Leila what Rabbi Shimon, the way Rabbi Shimon felt that the pasuk needed to be explained, misares le lekra v'darish le. He changed around the pasuk in order that it should fit his drasha. Why is this so interesting? The Rabbi Shimon's drasha does not follow the order of the pasuk, which we would think. We would think that the Torah itself ranked these things. Rabbi Shimon is just explaining the ranking, but in fact, Rabbi Shimon switches around the order of the pasuk. And Rava says that is exactly what he was praising Rabbi Shimon for. His ingenuity, his creativity, and his interpretation of this pasuk is what made this drasha so great. The reason this statement of Rava struck me is because we don't often get a glimpse into the way Chazal think, into the way they look at their different types of drashot. So although we are often left with very difficult drashot that seems so far from what the Torah is actually telling us. It is rare that we actually see one Amora praising another for his explanation of the Torah and saying, wow, how great is your creativity here, how amazing it is what you did with the Torah, even though it is so far from what the Torah actually says. And the question, though, is I still wasn't entirely sure what exactly was so interesting about this, other than this rare glimpse into how Chazal think about how they interpret the Torah. Why in this context was it so interesting? And looking back at the original context of the pasuk, it struck me that, in fact, what Rabbi Shimon was doing was his creativity and his original ideas was exactly the opposite of the context in the Torah, of this is exactly not lo tasun. This is exactly Rabbi Shimon following his intuition and following his gut and saying, this is how I understand this pasuk, as opposed to the Torah, which was saying to us, I have a very clear set of instructions for you, and this is how you need to observe. This is how you should be doing this, and don't follow the ways of the idolaters. I'm going to lay out for you exactly how you're supposed to worship God. And I think that that's perhaps really what Rava is saying here, is saying that why was it so important that Rabbi Shimon explained this pasuk this way? Because in the context of the greater section in Parashat Re'eh, Rabbi Shimon is coming and saying that, yes, the Torah lays out for us a set of laws, and this is how society needs to be run, but that does not exclude every individual person's own ideas and original thought. And not only does it not exclude it, but it's something that Rava praises Rabbi Shimon for. And I think Rava's praise is saying exactly that every person's individual ideas have a place within the greater context of the society that the Torah lays out for us. Shabbat Shalom.